Hello, and welcome to the 13th episode of Season 11 of the Dark Money Files, in which we shine a light into a murky world. I'm Ray Blake, and with me is my co-host, friend and business partner, Graham Barrow. Hello, Graham.
Hello, Ray. 13th episode. That must be the drawing to a close on Season 11, then.
Oof, Season 12, hot on its heels, no doubt.
Wow.
Now, Graham, we've been sponsored by Risk Alert 247 for a few episodes now, and we're being approached by banks, payment firms and others who want to know more about the service. I thought it might be helpful to outline what happens when you do follow up and get in touch.
Well, I think that's a really good idea, Ray, because there's a lot of activity on that front at the moment. Well, I think as a lot of our listeners know, there is a significant problem with UK corporate entities. Companies House, in fact, has recently unveiled its Companies House Strategic Intelligence Assessment, which you'll find on their website. And it does not pull any punches, does it, Ray?
No.
No. So one quote which I lifted was this, and it is, quote, "It is almost certain that the scale of money laundering through UK limited companies is underestimated. There's no assessment of its value currently available. It is highly likely that limited company structures within the UK are widely used to facilitate many types of serious and organised criminality. Work is ongoing to fully understand the scale of the issue." Wow.
And right now, firms will be onboarding new and existing business entities and issuing them accounts based often on very basic information without having any sight of some significant contextual risk indicators.
That's right, Ray. And these could be businesses you're onboarding and offering services to. They could be businesses in your outsourcing or supply chains, or in your transaction monitoring queues as counterparties.
So having Risk Alert 247 on your side, monitoring at present 168, I think, contextual risk indicators, can save massive amounts of time, money and risk. What happens when someone reaches out to learn more, Graham?
Well, we can provide, Ray, you and me, an online demonstration of the system very easily. The system is live and working, and we can show it with real current data and show examples of the risks it highlights.
Yeah, now we don't show slides or mock-ups or a sandbox version. You see the real thing.
Yes, you do. And then we can arrange, if you are suitably impressed, and we think you will be, a proof of concept.
And that's where you send us a file of company registration numbers. Ideally, a few thousand, but fewer also works if that's all you've got. And we run them through the system, risk rate them all, and investigate a few of the risk outliers for inclusion in a report.
And that report will highlight the kinds of things you might expect to be exposed to, and will help you understand how the system might make a difference to your anti-financial crime defences. And if at that point you decide it's not for you, it's not an issue. But otherwise, we can talk about next steps.
Which are pretty easy in most cases, since Risk Alert doesn't collect or handle any of your customer PII. It runs from an API that works just from the company registration number.
Yeah, clever, isn't it? So, get in touch if that sounds like a worthwhile exercise.
Yes, please do. Last time, Graham, we promised an analysis of the recent enforcements against TD Bank in the US and Starling Bank in the UK.
Now, I've read a lot of commentary about these, and much of it isn't very nuanced, I'd say. There is a great deal of outrage about TD and its criminal practices, and in particular about the lack of individual prosecutions. Lock them up. And Starling are taken to task for growing the business massively while keeping compliance in startup mode.
That seems to sum up much of the punditry, Graham, but I think there are some deeper lessons we can learn here, some more subtle indications of what regulators are paying attention to and expecting firms to have routinely taken care of.
Okay, well, I'm sure our listeners are all ears, Ray, so where shall we start?
Well, let's start with Starling. And its fine that relates to what the reporting refers to as shockingly lax financial crime controls.
But there's important detail here, isn't there, Ray?
There is, Graham. Shockingly lax refers to their approach to sanctions screening. They only screened against a subset of the consolidated UK sanction list, just those that applied to individuals who were known to reside in or have links to the UK, contrary to its own sanctions policy.
So their policy describes an approach that they weren't actually taking.
Indeed.
Well, that's a bit of a schoolboy error. As I understand it, they weren't screening international payments.
No, they weren't. And they were doing background screening only every 14 days.
As much as that. Sorry, I'm being sarcastic. Now, that is interesting, though. This describes the automated ongoing screening of all their customers and beneficial owners against sanctions lists, which most software does on a daily basis. Although, if I'm right, Ray, there is no regulation to say that it has to.
That's right, Graham. Now, given the strict liability for sanctions breaches, though, I can see the regulator's point here. Starling, incidentally, was said never to have had a sanctions alert on an individual customer. It couldn't properly explain why it was comfortable with its approach and had opened at least one account for a designated individual.
Oops. But that does seem to fit the shockingly lax description.
But that description could equally be applied to another enforcement finding there.
Oh, could it?
Well, yes. Listeners may remember that in the episode where we looked into outsourcing, we highlighted the case of Coinbase, whose internal outsourcing of compliance controls to other group entities had caused it to breach the terms of a VREC.
I remember that, Ray, but perhaps before we go on, a quick explanation of what a VREC is would be helpful.
Sure. A VREC, VREQ, or voluntary requirement, is where you agree with the regulator that you will accept some sort of restriction on your activities. Now, don't be misled by the word voluntary. That simply means that the firm jumped rather than being pushed. However, once it's agreed, it has the force of law.
Okay, so Coinbase had entered into a VREC that stopped them onboarding high-risk customers. And then, unfortunately, they kept on onboarding high-risk customers.
Well, in a nutshell, yes, although it was a little bit more complicated than that.
Well, Ray, of course it was.
And it was a little bit more complicated as well when exactly the same thing happened at Starling, but the effect was the same. Starling agreed they would not onboard high-risk customers, then later found that they had actually onboarded high-risk customers, while the VREC was supposed to have prevented them from doing so.
Yeah, but it was worse than that, though, wasn't it? Because the controls failure that allowed this had actually led them to onboarding customers they had previously exited on financial crime grounds, which, however you look at it, is a major faux pas.
And way beyond high risk. Furthermore, while Starling became aware of the breach in July of 2022, they didn't tell the FCA about it until August 2022.
Yeah, you see, timing your regulatory disclosures shouldn't be something that needs, well, much thought, should it, Ray?
Well, no. I mean, I've had conversations with non-compliance management on this quite regularly. When something goes wrong that needs disclosing, CEOs and COOs often want to first assess the scale of the problem, perhaps identify remediation actions and set out a plan to present the regulator with a nice, neat package. But the problem is that requires time. And you then risk the regulator deciding you haven't fulfilled Principle 11, which requires openness and cooperation with the regulator.
Well, quite. So, what went wrong here?
Well, the enforcement notice outlines that on the 21st of September 2023, a consultancy firm provided an independent review of Starling's implementation of the VREC, attributing many problems to failures by Starling's senior management.
Ouch. And this picks up the wider theme in the notice, which is criticism of Starling's failure to match its rapid business growth with similar scaling in its systems and controls. In particular, there was not enough testing and management oversight of the controls and how they were working.
Yeah, now bear those in mind. They're going to be important again when we look at TD Bank.
OK, well, let's go there now, Ray.
OK, now TD Bank is more straightforward in many ways. 12 years after HSBC was found to be enabling criminal cartels to launder money, TD was found to be doing the same, and it was found criminally liable. Prosecutors said the bank operated with inadequate guards against money laundering for nearly a decade, failing to act even when staff flagged obvious cases of abuse, such as a customer making daily deposits of $1 million in cash.
Oh, well, look, we all do that sometime or the other, don't we?
No.
No. Oh, sorry, I thought you said $1 in cash. I missed that. Anyway, so the Attorney General said further individual prosecutions were expected. By making its services convenient for criminals, TD Bank became one, he said.
Indeed, there has been an individual prosecution. A member of staff in the compliance team allegedly provided criminals with personal details belonging to TD Bank customers that allowed those criminals to defraud the customers.
Knowingly, Ray?
Well, I mean, that's certainly the implication. Encrypted telegram messaging was used. It doesn't seem accidental.
No. OK, but I imagine that the Attorney General was referring to action against more senior leaders for their role in the organisational level criminality?
Well, yeah, I expect so. And we should certainly expect more news in the coming weeks.
So there would appear to be little to learn beyond don't choose a life of crime, but there are some striking similarities here, aren't there, Ray?
Well, yeah, there are. At a press conference announcing the charges, US officials said the bank had starved, their word, its compliance programs of investment, even as it grew.
So again, we see a commercial organisation supporting revenue growth with recruitments and systems spend, but not doing the same for compliance.
And eventually it means you're playing in the Premier League with a Premier League team, a Premier League manager, facing Premier League referees, but with a Sunday pub league goalkeeping coach.
Yeah, well, Ray, that's a very English metaphor, but I'm sure our international listeners who will watch Premier League games, I guess a lot, will get the general point. So both Starling and TD Bank outgrew their controls and didn't take care to invest in matching their defences in the face of significantly bigger risks.
Yeah, exactly that. And in another echo of Starling's partial coverage with screening, TD, by 2018, was failing to monitor more than 90% of the transactions on its network.
Which I can't imagine reflected its policy at the time. So again, we have systems that could theoretically address the exposures, but which are only partially effective or partially applied.
And there's a clear regulatory expectation that senior management ought to have had sight of this, ought to have ensured that monitoring and testing of controls was in place and that issues were escalated for senior attention. What senior management can't see, they can't govern.
And in one further echo of Starling, in 2019 and 2021, independent consultants warned TD Bank about its inadequate transaction monitoring, including testing and oversight, but action didn't result.
OK, so look, let's put this together. What are the lessons from these two major enforcement actions?
Well, let's focus on the big issues, Ray. I think the foremost has to be to match business growth with increased compliance capacity.
Yeah, because more and bigger risks need greater attention and oversight.
Yep. Next, be open with the regulator. Don't wait a month to disclose things they would expect notice of.
By all means, tell them there's more to investigate and that you'll provide them with more detail and remediation proposals as soon as you can, but don't hold off the disclosure. Do it straight away.
Yeah, your point, Ray, that what senior management can't see, they can't govern, means there needs to be a clear view of what's actually happening day to day by senior management.
Yeah, this permacloud between management up in the sky and operational teams down on the ground can't be allowed to persist.
No. And then finally, systems need care and supervision. A drum we have banged regularly.
Well, we certainly have. And speaking of banging drums, both TD and Starling received independent reports from external consultants that told them quite clearly they had problems. But those reports weren't acted upon.
Now, we know from having worked in large corporate environments that those reports need senior sponsorship if they are to be commissioned in the first place. It seems crazy that doesn't turn into senior attention and senior action when they raise important findings.
Well, yeah, it does, but in a way it's understandable, Graham. To a CEO, getting a consultant to investigate and report feels like a solution in itself. The exec then moves on to other concerns, thinking that this one has been handled.
So when a few weeks or months later the report comes in, it's an unwelcome echo of a problem they considered that was behind them.
Well, yeah, from a psychological point of view, it's clear that there's jeopardy in opening and reading the report. But of course, that's what the big bucks are for.
Yeah, I'm thinking, for those who know, Post Office, I'm thinking Danske Bank. I mean, there's just too many, aren't there? Yeah. That acting on it, of course, is really the big thing, isn't it? Not just reading it.
Yeah, well, quite so.
And I think, Ray, there's another nuance to all this with a further enforcement notice that related to Metro Bank, which came out a week or two ago.
Yeah, this was a fine for inadequate transaction monitoring systems, wasn't it?
That's right, but the interesting point for me was that staff had repeatedly escalated concerns about the system and its issues that did not result in any corrective action.
Just like in TD, where staff on the ground had great visibility of what was going on. The gaps in compliance were so well known internally that staff joked that the bank's motto, America's most convenient bank, was marketed towards criminals.
It's not a good look, is it?
Not really.
And important, I think, Ray, that there's no hint of criminal complicity at Metro Bank. We must make that point. But this theme of staff insight not managing to get through the perma-cloud to senior management keeps cropping up, doesn't it?
It certainly does. I was at a conference a few weeks ago and one of the speakers was Sarah Beth Felix. She said that banks needed to give their financial crime heads a voice on the board, not just the compliance head. And that seems like a good way to penetrate the permacloud.
Yeah, I think I might shove a couple of staff members on there as well, just to give the view from... Anyway, yeah, who are we to say? But I do agree, Ray. I think that's a really good point. So that is our analysis of those recent enforcements. It's not something we often do on the podcast, but sometimes when we see these deeper connecting themes, it's worth a bit of a deep dive.
Yeah, I think it is. So, what's next for us, Graham?
Well, Ray, here in the UK, it's the National Scam Awareness Week, and I've been watching a few different programmes and actually seeing some scams I've never heard of before. So I just thought we might maybe pull some interesting, in a kind of intellectual way, scams together and do a podcast about them.
I'm looking forward to it.